Hello, everyone. I'm Becky Robinson. I'm so pleased to be here with my old friend Heather Younger. We're excited that you've joined us to invest some time in learning today. So, as we get started, I do want to let you know about a few housekeeping announcements. We are recording today's session. And so, as you learn from this conversation with Heather, we would invite you to share that with your friends and colleagues. Later, it will be on our YouTube channel. Also, in the event that it would be helpful for you, there is closed captioning available in the bottom of your Zoom panel. We do want to make sure our events are inclusive for everyone, so please feel free to turn on those captions should you need them. And Glenn knows, because he already posted, that I always ask folks to let us know where you're calling in from today. So welcome to Glenn in Bend, Oregon. And we would love to hear from others of you. We'd love to know where you're calling in from. If you happen to be attending today as part of your professional development, we would also invite you to let us know what organization you're representing, and I will do my best to give you a shout out. So it's great to see that we have a caller in Montana, Switzerland, Texas, Wisconsin, Shelley in Ann Arbor, Michigan, not far from me at all. We've got some folks in Illinois and Wisconsin, California. So thank you to all of you who have chosen to invest some time in learning with us today. It is wonderful to see all of you represented. And it looks like we do have someone from UNC Chapel Hill. So a shout out to UNC Chapel Hill, a shout out to the Carnegie Museums in Pittsburgh, a shout out to Covenant Living. So we're thrilled that you're investing some time to learn. In the event that you have not been a part of my past events with Heather, I do want to take a quick moment to introduce her. Heather is the founder and CEO of Employee Fanatics, and they are dedicated to inspiring and training leaders to put their employees first. And you might know that Heather has written several other books. I happen to have one right behind me, The Art of Active Listening. She also wrote The Art of Caring Leadership. And her latest book, The Art of Self-Leadership, is going to be released in January 28th. So, one of the things about Heather is that she's a sought after keynote speaker. She's always traveling and speaking and inspiring people with her powerful keynotes. And I know you'll get a taste of that today. So, welcome, Heather.
Thank you. I'm excited to be back with you. You're my one of my favorite groups to be with. So thanks for being here with me.
Of course. And there's so much that we have the chance to learn from today. And before we dive in, I want to say that I am always a learner with you. And I'm especially excited to learn from Heather. Self-leadership seems like such a powerful topic as we may be doing some planning for the new year, who we want to be, how we want to show up in the world. And so I'm excited to dive in. So we want to get some feedback from you on a poll. I'm going to launch a poll, and I'm curious to hear, do you consciously practice self-leadership? So how often do you consciously practice self-leadership? Do you do it consistently and purposefully, often, but you could improve, occasionally when you need to, or do you rarely think about leading yourself? So please take a look there. And I think that I have someone in the chat asking if the closed captioning does translation. I am not sure if it does or not, but I can't read French, so I could be reading your comment incorrectly. So hopefully you're able to access and understand our communication today. All right, I'm going to give this another couple of moments, but Heather, I'm curious, what do you think we're going to see in these poll results?
I would guess people say often, but I could improve.
All right, well, let's take a look. I will share those results with you. So about 8% of you rarely think about consciously practicing self-leadership. In the middle is the biggest group, some of you occasionally, others of you often, and about 15% of you are high achievers as it relates to self-leadership, consistently and purposefully practicing it. So thank you for giving us your feedback. And my hope would be that by the end of today, you would have some tips and guidelines from Heather about how to more often consciously practice self-leadership. So, as we get started, Heather, we were joking a little bit before the webinar started about the art of books that you've done. First, The Art of Caring Leadership, then The Art of Active Listening. Now, this book, and then sneak preview, one more to come with this Art of title. But tell me a little bit about the inspiration and journey behind this book, The Art of Self-Leadership, and what led you to write it. But before you do that, I forgot to mention, we are going to host a virtual launch celebration for the book on launch day, January 28th. And I know you have a very special guest. I don't know if we're talking about the special guest, but we do want to invite all of you to sign up to be with us for the virtual launch at the end of January. Um, and are we going to say the special guest, Heather?
Yeah, Dr. Amy Edmondson, the creator, the person who coined psychological safety, she'll be the special guest. I will have messages from Stephen M. R. Covey on there, and there'll be some other special guests that'll be showing up, but she's going to be kind of the main focus that'll be joining me. We'll be talking a little bit more in that process about failure, which is embedded inside of self-leadership too, but I love her view of that. So yeah, she's partnering with me on that.
Amazing. I can't wait. It's going to be a great day. So let's get back to the inspiration behind the art of self-leadership and what led you to write this book now.
Well, it's interesting for those who have read The Art of Caring Leadership. The Art of Self Leadership is actually the first behavior inside of that book, and it was the biggest chapter. I had a hard time containing myself, I'm gonna be honest. And part of the reason why it continues to rise to the surface is as I speak to audiences around the country, and even just like through focus groups and things I've done. And reading through surveys and things and employee engagement surveys I do with organizations, I often see that if I ask people why it is or what are the barriers to them showing up, let's say, as the leaders they want to be, as if I say caring leadership and listening and they say, well, the problem is my budget, or the problem is my leadership team, they XYZ, or my manager da, 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 da. And I would say, and I got to the point where I was like, you know what, I am noticing people are abdicating responsibility for how they show up. I didn't like that. uh, I try hard not to do that. I'm not perfect at it. And I just said, someone needs to kind of bring this to the surface. And it kind of goes back even a bit further back. I think about a TED talk I did in 2019 on transforming adversity into opportunity. And I did that TED talk because I was kind of sick of hearing a lot of people in the world sounding like victims. And I said to myself, like, I could be a victim. Like, I have a reason to be a victim in my backstory. But there's always something in me that said, like, come on, just like keep moving forward, like keep prodding forward. And I had that desire to lead myself in a much more effective way than I had seen many of the leaders around me. So between seeing it in myself and seeing it in the world and hearing it in my audiences, I just felt compelled to come forward with the type of content.
So that's really interesting, Heather. You're saying it's like hearing people with the victim mentality. It sounds like an external locus of control of not realizing that they can make an impact or make choices about how they show up, inspired you to write this book now. Let's talk a little bit more about why this moment in time is so critical for self-leadership. And I'd also love to hear you define self-leadership. How are you defining it in the book?
Yeah. So really self-leadership for me, I introduced in a book a self-leadership integrative model, and it's broken down into kind of three different parts, but it's really focusing more on self-discovery and self-empowerment, and not necessarily on a focus on leading other people, where a lot of my work before was a lot about leading other people. I'm saying before we can even go to that discussion, you got to learn to lead you. So the formal definition is a journey of growing inwardly to shine outwardly, spiraling upwards towards self-awareness, self-awareness, resilience, and then purposeful action. So I think everything I do is going to be about, like, let's not just be philosophical about this thing. Let's figure out how we actually go do and be something different and better. And so that's what it's so focused on. That is thinking about growth, resilience, inward, outward work. But in the end, we cannot lead others unless we are leading ourselves first. And that has just been at the forefront of all of my messages and work up to this point.
That is so powerful. So let's talk about how this topic of self-leadership is really relevant for almost anyone at any level in the organization. What is it that makes this concept so universally relevant?
I'm going to take a step back on this idea of like, why here, why now? If you look at the world around us, I don't know about anybody else, but I feel like everybody's off their rockers. And And as I think about our ability or our need to control who we are, how our emotions, our mindset, how we show up for others outside, what we do for ourselves to kind of help our own emotional well-being and mental health. There are so many different components. How do we like jump over obstacles and barriers? How do we know how to hold space for people when we need to, and how do we know how to walk away when it's necessary? Again, within our own shoes in the circle that we're in. So as we look around the world, I feel like the answer is right in front of us. We have to learn how to lead ourselves, because if not, other people will gladly tell us exactly what to do, and it may not be something that serves us best. As we think about everybody else, like how does this apply more broadly, so that it's not just those who manage people? That term leadership, I find that in audiences I speak to with people who have manager titles, or those who are supposed to be in authority, those people also are afraid to lead themselves. They don't see themselves as leaders, partly because of the pressure that it's on them to do it, partly because they don't really know what that is, and partly because the power has been taken away from them in so many ways that they feel a little helpless to lead anybody in themselves in a way without asking for permission first. So my goal was to say, I want to be more inclusive with this book. To include people who don't have manager titles, because no matter what, they are leading somebody. They're leading them. Then people are looking to them for guidance in their community, at the grocery store, gosh, anywhere. And if we can all say, I want to have more control over me so that I can show up and show that shine externally more brightly, right? Then I don't have to, it's not about title. How am I showing up for the person who's the human on the other side, who is looking to me in some way for care, concern, guidance? And if I can't answer how I'm doing that for me, and then my like the smaller sphere of influence, and then more broadly, I can't be an effective leader externally.
That makes a lot of sense, Heather. So I'm wondering if you would share with us some of your personal and professional experiences that have uniquely equipped you to write this book.
For some of you who are on this call, because I see some names I recognize, some best friends and things that are on there, you know some of the backstory. But in this book, I talk about my backstory of having a journey of kind of exclusion in my own family, and then I also reveal or bring to the surface um, living in a house that had some drug addiction. And I'm the only child, and I had to kind of get myself through it, because there were no siblings to help me through how do I see myself in this world? Do I really belong? My level of importance and worthiness as a human. And then at the same time, rising to the occasion to almost be the adult at times in my home with that addiction that I was facing, and trying to figure out how I could actually um, jump over all those things. And so having some of those barriers and those obstacles really early on as a kid created in me two things. And I see one of my bestie, Sarah's on here, and she pinpointed it, and it is the ability to hold like strength, a sense of strength. And at the same time, a sense of kind of compassion, a social awareness, warmth, relatability. So having both of those things at the same time came from the journey of exclusion, from the resilience that was built through that addiction in my home. And so just that is what got me there. And it just kind of along the way has helped me develop the tools, which I talk about in the book, on how do I keep myself focused on the things that, there's things that are happening around me all the time. And yes, I get knocked off course occasionally and for short periods of time, like any human is, right? Any human is going to have that. But it's that like thickness of skin that was developed early on as a kid that allowed me to stay focused on the things that are around me. And then what happened later on, which I talk about in this book. So self leadership is not the same as self reliance or being in a silo. I learned over time, particularly in my 40s, that I needed to lean on a support system, on a network of people who knew me, who would take me in, who cared about me, irrespective of what I like showed them, right? I could show them the ugly sides, they still loved me. They still were there to support me. And I learned that I had to lean on other people to even be able to grow in self-leadership, right? You have to, in order to kind of create that I call it a kind of not a barrier, but like this strength, almost like your Batman, Batwoman. You got this thing around you that helps to protect you. And it's not just you inside that doing that. It's the group of people that you choose to be around you, aside from your family, that you bring into your circle, and they're there to uplift you and they're there to help you course correct. So it's a huge part of self leadership to look for feedback, to give feedback where it's at, but to receive that feedback. I have an example of this for you, a story, because it's so, I just, children teach me so much. Thanks, Ron, for telling me about the vulnerability. So one of my kids, my second youngest, he's like 6'4" and 220 pound, big dude, wanting to go into the military. And the other day he's telling me he leads this squadron for Civil Air Patrol, and he was telling me about one of the people who kind of reports up to him, and he asked him for feedback. He's like, okay, here's the thing I'm doing. What are the things you see as my biggest barriers? What do you see as like my biggest weaknesses? Is what he's asking one of his subordinates. And the person, because of the way he asked it, told him straight up, here are three things I see that you could do better at. And my son goes, okay, great. Like, I'm going to go do that. So then he goes and he has this next meeting where he gets to go put that feedback into play, into action, right? And he comes back to me and he goes, okay, did you see any difference on any of those three things that you told me would be good ways for me to kind of polish myself up? And the person said, oh yeah, you did great, great at this and great at this. Again, he is somebody who's like, towering over everyone else. He's already from a senior position, like above, he's commanding the squadron. And at the same time, he is just openly and actively figuring out how he gets better by asking for feedback. And that's one of the components we talk about inside of this book on the art of self leadership, making sure that we are seeking feedback actively, aggressively almost, so that we can continue to be better.
I wonder where he learned that, Heather.
Well, he did get it from me, that is for sure. It is extremely important, and I take it to heart. I take feedback to heart. I will always try to be polished. One thing I do want to say is I talk about feedback and getting better, and this book has some self-help components to it. And it is it's one issue that I have, and I start the book off this way. As I'm talking about how we are good because we're good. Like we're good in and of ourselves and we are worthy in and of ourselves. And so while I talk about how we can polish the thing and bring that inward to outward, right, to make sure that we're shining externally, I don't want people hear me saying that we aren't good enough now or that we aren't worthy enough now. Because by the way, if you stopped trying to make yourself better, even today, you're still going to be just good and you'll be good enough, period. You don't have to worry about trying to be good enough or worthy enough. Just because we're put on this planet, you are good. That's how we were created. Okay. So just know that. And when I'm saying like this is what you can do, it's more about how do you just have a better shine? How do you become more brilliant to those around you? How do you do that? You just polish it. You start working on you in your own little ways. But it's not because you're not good enough. It's just that you just want to have your shine be more brilliant.
Well, I am seeing in the chat and all the emojis that are flying. I think that resonates so strongly. And what a good reminder at a time that, many of us might be feeling like the end of the year crush and so many demands on our time, just to know that what you get done or don't get done today, you are enough. And thank you for that, Heather. So, thinking about this concept of self-leadership, we've been talking about it on the personal level of how can self-leadership help you shine more brightly, be your best self. Let's talk a little bit about how self-leadership can positively impact in our organizations. So, how it can help our organization's cultures and a team to be more successful.
Yeah, one of the things, again, like I said, I brought this to the surface because of what I was hearing in audiences, and most of my audiences are corporate audiences. So I'm hearing people who are leaders inside of organizations or team members inside of organizations who are struggling to, again, show up in the way they want. Not delay, not wait for permission. And so one of the things I think that this moment and this topic and specifically my book is focused on is how are you going to you empower you, and then how do you give permission for other people to be self-empowered, and you do that by how you show up. I feel like people are watching us all the time if they look to us for guidance in any way, shape, or form, and it's up to us to stand up to it, like to perform based upon their expectations, right? And sometimes we have our own expectations of ourselves and it's higher, sometimes it's lower, and we don't feel comfortable with how people put us in boxes. And so at work, it is about making sure that other people are being empowered to take on risks, to move without waiting for permission. I had one somebody tell me about the story too. They were telling about their partner, and I don't think he was a manager. He was just maybe he was a project lead, maybe on something, and he was new to his position, and he felt himself waiting and waiting for his boss to like schedule meetings to do things, and he was just in a holding pattern all the time, waiting for green lights. And so she said, "Oh my gosh, this book would be amazing because I keep trying to tell him to stop waiting and stop waiting for his manager to tell him what's next." Now, to a certain extent, we need guardrails and we need some expectation. We need to know what success looks like, right? So I get that part. But once you know the big picture, what is it inside of us that keeps making us wait and in a holding pattern at work? And so I'm just saying, like, get off the mark on that and start to empower you. Discover what's inside of you so that then you can kind of move forward at work and not always be delaying. Why do you keep delaying? Why are you waiting for green lights? There's some backstory, there's some component that's going on that's happened either through jobs, like positions you've held at different organizations that keep telling you you have to stop and you have to wait for a boss. Do you have they really? Like that's the thing I want us to be thinking about. And then as we say, I can give my own self a green light to take the next step. For example, in this case, that gentleman could just schedule a meeting or stop in and say, "Can I have a 15-minute conversation with you to get really clear about what it is I need to do next or what I think I'm going to do next and want to make sure you're going to be okay with it. And now I'm going to go do that thing next." Instead of saying, "Is my manager going to schedule the meeting? Is this person going to do the thing?" Just do the thing. Just do it.
Yeah, I love that. And, thinking about how that would change the organization's culture if people did stop waiting and did, take that next step. I imagine there'd be a lot more like a sense of ownership of the organization and the outcomes that the organization is creating.
Absolutely. And I would venture to guess that if we look at kind of the hard line numbers or some of the bottom line things, right, that you would see productivity increase because people feel bought in and they feel like they have more of a voice in whatever the process is going to be. And often what happens inside of the culture is things are, directives, initiatives are just handed down and you go do X, Y, Z. In an empowered culture, one that's like full of a whole bunch of self leaders, where the executive leadership team is thumbs up about having a lot of self leaders. Okay, I'm going to say that too. Where they start to see the results to the bottom line much more because now people are going out, they're taking risks, they're innovating, they're meeting with them to say, "Here's where we're going. What do you like? What's this direction?" And boom, they get to go on. So there aren't all these stops and starts that are happening as it relates to the goals and things that they have.
Sure. So I have a question from Sarah that seems to apply in this moment, so I'll ask it. She's asking, do you think part of the hesitation to make a decision is fear not only of doing the wrong thing, but also fear of conflict? It seems that people don't want to make decisions because they're avoiding potential conflict more than anything else. So how could self-leadership help counteract that fear of conflict?
Yeah, I do think so much of how, that's a great question, Sarah. And I'm going to come back to that and explain how this book is organized and kind of how I was thinking through self-leadership. So I break it down into three separate parts. The first one is self-understanding. The second one is more like personal growth and sustainability. How do you continue to grow? How do you sustain that growth? And then the third one is social influence and social interaction influence. And so I do that purposely because there's like this inside job that has to take place of like understanding what is the narrative that's happening here from the history, from how we show up, um, and what how is that stopping us like from a fear perspective. I've got like a Cujo going on here. This is like the real life stuff, right? My dog's here. How does that stop us through fears and imposter syndrome from moving forward to any of the other to the next stage? And then again, how does that reveal? So if we think about conflict, for example, so much of the conflict, fear is embedded in that because how do we have the skills to know how to, from a social interaction standpoint, even deal with people who are different from us? How can we hold space for differences? How do we then not necessarily say that we accept the difference, but how do we know how to handle that? Because that oftentimes that listening component is in there. Are we really in it to understand the other person. Because often conflict can kind of go away if we are really truly seeking to understand the other person and where they're coming from. It doesn't mean we agree. And so I think that's part of it is we don't have the skill set to handle differences and how people show up differently, then it's going to make it harder for us to really to respond to conflict in a healthy way, I think.
Yeah, that's a really helpful framing. I know that you were talking about how so much of your book is about this reframing, and that's a great way of looking at conflict differently. So, Sarah, I hope that was helpful for you. Um, I have one more question here for now, and then we do have some more like questions and comments coming in the chat as well. Please feel free if you have some questions for Heather to start getting those ready, and we'll address as many as we can during our time together. But I'm curious, Heather, as you've been working on the book, how you have seen the concept of self-leadership evolving in the workplace.
Mm, interesting. I'm going to be honest. I'm not sure I've seen a lot of evolution of,
Hmm.
to be honest. Oh gosh, sorry. Here we go. This is what happens with
We
doggy.
can't hear the dog. There's just like a slight audio interference on your end, I think.
She sounds like Cujo, but she really isn't all that bad. Um, anyway, so I think. Okay, just one second. Hold
All right. Well, while we're waiting for Heather, I'm just going to give a quick plug for her book, her new book, The Art of Self-Leadership. It's coming from Wiley on January 28th, 2025. Um, I can't believe that it's going to be 2025 already. And now we have Heather back.
That was what you call a FedEx delivery with a Cujo sounding dog.
Well, we just did a quick plug for the new book while you were gone.
Oh, awesome. Awesome. Well, I appreciate that. Okay. So now the question, do a rewind real fast for me, please.
Yeah, so let's talk about how, if any, you've seen the approach to self-leadership evolving in the workplace.
Yes. Yeah. Like I said, I don't really think there's been a lot of evolution going on. I think that's probably part of the issue is I think there's a fear that's going on. There's a fear safety, which is why I have Dr. Amy Edmondson joining me on my VLP, because I do think uh, when we have fear embedded and in a sense of powerlessness that's happening inside of work, people don't want to own their own journey. They're afraid to, and they may have been like, slapped on the hand because of it. And so I think it could be getting a little worse, particularly as you look at the political backdrop and things that are happening in our world, and everybody's fear around talking about differences, just having conversations, engaging with people. I think this is it's just something that's needed, but I will be interested to see how much we get adoption of this. I have seen, for example, on my front as a keynote speaker, that this whole idea of personal leadership and leadership confidence is a trending topic. So I think it's right appropriately timed for the time that the world. And I think part of it is also organizational leaders are looking at their results. They're saying, well, our sales are off or our customer satisfaction is down or whatever. Boy, we need to stop trying to micromanage. We need to create a like army of leaders, whether they have titles or not. And
Mhm.
so I'm hoping that the trend will be moving the direction of more of an openness to have people take more control of their own leadership at work, whether they have a title or not.
I wonder we should just declare that 2025 is the year of self-leadership.
Let's do it. Let's declare it. Everybody on here, let's go declare it.
So, can we talk for a few moments about self-care? Before we got on to the call, we were talking a little bit about your own journey this year in 2024 and how you started the year with, a desire to have more space for your family and have less pressure from the travel that you do. So, how does prioritizing self-care contribute to effective self-leadership?
Yeah, I mean, it really is at the crux of who we are as people who aspire to lead others. And again, leadership to me is more about showing concern and kindness towards those who look to you for guidance in some way. So you are a resource for them, you are available for them, but you can't be fully, wholly available for them if you aren't fully, wholly available for you. So self-care provides, again, that outer strength, it's inner and outer strength. And it also gives permission to show up. For other people, like they see it and they go, oh well, I need to go care for me too, is to make sure that I'm taking care of myself. So like here's an example. Like, people think that self-care has to be you going to you're going to the spa every week. And that's not necessarily it. Here's self-care. Self-care is drinking enough ounces of water every day. Self-care for you is what it is for you. It's what it is that fills you up. It could be gardening, running, meditating, praying. It could be the list goes on and on. But you don't have to do it in big chunks, and it doesn't have to be done like nonstop. But I always say, like, it's you don't just like do self-care and then stop self-care and then you lead people better. This stuff is done in tandem, right? So you're leading you while you're trying to lead others, and you're constantly keeping that as like as a North Star to know that you have to keep you at the center of all things. As a mother of four children, I was getting really crazy busy with the travel, and of course, the rolling out the book schedule doesn't help either. And then my health started to go downhill. And as it was last year, I think it was the end of last year, I got news I was pre-diabetic. And I said to myself, like, this has got to end. There's no way I'm going any further than this. And so I knew that in 2024, I had to take time to really love on myself some more. So get myself healthy. And I knew because of that travel schedule from the year before, I did not want another year of that. So I kind of set my intention to say, okay, I'm going to accept the things that align more with what I value most. I'm going to decline the things that might be kind of more of a waste or check the box for the organization that's trying to hire me. I'm not interested in taking on that kind of business because I want to have a bigger impact in the world. So there was a level of intentionality that I entered into 2024 with. Did I land on everything? Heck no, I did not land on everything. I missed my revenue goal by about 10%. But in the end, I also am healthier. I have no regrets because I see my kids that are in college and how they're thriving, and the other one who's going to be going off. So in the end, there's like this ebb and flow, and there is a time and a place for different things. And so you and I were talking about this, a personal and a professional. And sometimes things are stronger and better in one area and over the other, and that is okay. This journey of self leadership, that by the way is embedded in caring leadership, isn't one of perfection. There's this progress thing. It's just improvement little by little, but always grounding ourselves in knowing that we are good as we are. And so I say that because I know that we're often on this journey of like self-improvement, positive. I gotta get myself better, 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 better. Always my muscles not showing, like all the things, right? And that is enough to drive every single one of us a little bit more bonkers. So I just, want us to kind of ground ourselves in that good enough idea, taking that breath deep in, right? I am good enough. I am worthy. That's there. And at the same time, I'd like the world to see the best of me. And that's what self-leadership's about.
Yeah, I love that. And, one of the things I heard you say about self-care, Heather, is it's not something that you do and then you set it aside and you get back to leading. It sounds like the most effective self-care is embedded through everything that we do, even in that moment that you just took for us to breathe deeply together. So, I'm curious if you have any ideas in the chat about ways that you can care for yourself so that you can lead yourself more effectively. We would love to see those in the chat. There's so much good conversation there. In fact, I'm going to throw in a question about the new book. Heather, someone was asking about whether there will be an audiobook for the new book.
I'm gonna have to do some serious self-care before next week because I've got 4 days of recording that audiobook. So it's like 9 to 5, I'll be in the studio recording. So for me, I'll have to insert like plenty of water. And if it's at 9 o'clock, so I can get to the gym if I want to, or go for a walk, right? I need to do all the things. So yeah, recording the audiobook next week. And I would say that they release it. So the book itself comes out January 28th. And I want to say it's sometime into February, beginning of March when they do the audiobook version. So it doesn't come out simultaneously.
Okay.
But you'll get it. So some people have said that they like my voice, so maybe you'll take the audiobook instead.
Well, especially if you have all of those affirmations in the book. Are those affirmations about you are enough? Are those in the book?
It is in the book. Yeah, it is in the book. I put that stuff in the book. I put activities that I want you to focus on. I'm not a person. Even when I speak, I'm not a motivational speaker. I want you to be inspired, but in the end, I want you to learn something different. Because if you don't take action, then it's just another book. Like, I need you to take an action, even if it's just one action. The book that's behind Becky, it was a whole framework on listening. And it's like, you're not gonna do everything perfectly, but can you just do one new thing? Because it will improve your relationships. And in this case, can you just do one new thing and it'll improve who you are, how you feel about you, and then how you show up for the world? That's the goal.
Amazing. Well, I have a very practical question to ask, and then we're going to share with folks more about how they can get your book and be involved, and then we'll be open for some Q&A. But I'm wondering, for those who, at the beginning we had a poll, how often are you consciously practicing self-leadership? For those on the call who do want to take steps to practice self-leadership more consciously, what are some, immediate first steps we could take? What are some things that we could implement right away, even before we have the book?
Yeah, one thing that I think is really the crux of everything is take some time after this call to write down your top five values, the things that you value you most. And what I mean by that is this. Let's say you're someone who say you have an open door policy, but then when someone approaches your door, do you kind of cringe or growl at them, or do you kind of like don't give them eye contact, or do you close the door, or are you never really there? So that idea of I want to be connected to the people that are on my team or that are in my in the organization. Is connection important to you, or is it really? Like, so start to evaluate. So write down the things you value. For me, for example, integrity and relatability are at the crux of who I am. Like, if I do something that disconnects me from another person, meaning they feel like I feel like I am above them, outside of improvement, all those things, I can't sleep at night, right? Same thing with integrity. If I say I'm going to do something I don't, I'm going to toss and turn, I can't sleep. Everybody has those things. What are those things? Because we have to know like what it is we value most, what so that we can know what we would then stand for most. So that when someone tries to tell us to go off that mark, we can stand strong in our shoes to say, wait a second, no, that goes against the thing I wrote down as my core value, the thing I say I stand for and that toss and turn over. So that is a really a great activity to do, I think, right away. I think the other thing is, you know what? It's never a bad thing to seek feedback. Now, seeking feedback, again, is to shine some of the insight to be more brilliant externally. But remember, the feedback isn't because you aren't good already. So just keep remembering that. Like, I'm doing this just to have more brilliance, just to show more brilliantly. But for feedback is a really good thing to go for.
Those are two really amazing practical next steps. So, just briefly, what we want to do is let you all know how to get a hold of this book so that you can learn to lead yourself more effectively. So, Heather has developed Team 100. And if you scan this QR code on my screen right now or use the link that Wendy is putting in the chat, you will get to find out all about Team 100. And as part of Team 100, you'll enjoy some exclusive benefits as part of Heather's campaign to launch the art of self-leadership. Also, you can pre-order individual copies or bulk copies for yourself and your team. And Heather, I did see a question in the chat earlier about whether for bulk orders of your book or individual orders, if there's a way for people to get signed book plates or signed books. So
Absolutely. Yes. Yep. Yep. You just there's when you go onto the website. So if you do bulk, depending on how big it is, you'd be coming through us anyway. So we'll have your information, and then I have the book plate, so I can absolutely sign those and send those out. It's going to be a little harder to do that with the individual ones, except for if you're part of Team 100. Then I'm going to be going over and above for you, because that means you have decided to invest your time and to be along the journey with me, and so I'm going to invest time in you as well.
amazing. So, Glenn, I think you're going to find a way to get some signed books from Heather. Glenn is a good friend and client of ours. His book came out this year, right, Glenn? It came out this year. And Glenn is like the king of giving away signed copies of books. He probably has bought more of my book than anyone else on the planet and
Oh,
signed ones and given them away to people. So if you have Glenn in your corner
awesome.
supporting your book launch, Heather, you're going to be in good company. So
Oh, that's awesome.
thank you,
Come
Glenn, for
along, Glenn.
supporting
Come along.
authors. Yeah. All right. So at this point, we do have some time for Q&A. I'm going to scroll back through the chat. I know there were some questions and comments that came in. I've tried to get to some of them. If I missed your question, I would appreciate you either copying it or just reminding me of it. And I do have one here from Shannon. So Shannon said, I think I can be a bit extra with proactivity at work. What gets in my way is workload. Too much on the plate can be very challenging. Could probably be more proactive with saying, hey, something needs to give here. Any tips for challenging workloads and using self-leadership in this scenario?
Um, for that particular person, so I'm assuming that's people putting the workload on her.
Hmm.
I think what happens is we don't, what would be a good thing to do in that case is to schedule time to speak with your manager about it. What happens most of the time is we want to shush up because we don't want anybody to see us as being weak or incapable or those types of things. But they're going to get more out of us, and they'll like to get more out of us in the long haul if they know we're struggling now or that we might need some help now, so that we can then prove that out for them later. If they don't know it because they're running around with their heads chopped off, they're just going to go with status quo. How can you expect them to read your mind? So make sure that you sit and spend that time with them to let them know. And it doesn't, don't wait for them to put the thing on the calendar. Ask for 15 minutes. Come send the pre-agenda and then go with them and say, like, here's what's going on. Is there any way for us to shuffle? Is there some way for me to reprioritize this? But take it upon yourself. Don't wait for the green light and don't wait for someone else to come to you to set it on your calendar. You go ahead and just take care of it. Go through their assistant if you need to, do whatever you have to do.
Thanks, Heather. I know that I've had team members before who are, very like upfront with where they are with their workload or what their boundaries are, and I find that as a leader to be super helpful. So, communicating is huge. So I do have a question here from Guy. He says, "I see this applying to people who are retired or semi-retired. So, any thoughts for folks who are in that phase and how they can apply self-leadership to let themselves
Mm.
be more effective?"
Yeah, I would think one of the things that comes to mind immediately on those who are retired is oftentimes our self-worth is tied up in the work we do. So if we no longer are doing that work, then we may have to go back to the drawing board to say, okay, let me go to the self-understanding part of it, do some activities in there to make sure I'm outlining, um, things that make me worthy aside from my work. And how can I find more fulfillment in things that are outside of that? I see that a lot, particularly with executive type of leaders, where their level of importance is so determined by their title and where, the position of authority they were in. And so it's for you, it's uncovering, it's going deeper on the self-understanding part, and then going into the personal growth side and say, okay, now that I understand this is a new way of being, I need to figure out what are the things that fill me up now and make me feel like I'm growing outside of work. So it's just digging deep, and there are activities for that inside the book to be looking at what are some of those things you can do. I didn't specifically address like here are for retired people, but this book is meant for everybody. It will speak to every person. I can guarantee you that who reads it because you're going to see yourself in different aspects of it, like on the communication side. How do I communicate differently with different people now that I'm retired? There could be different generations that are outside of work. There's so many different components of self leadership. So the one thing I did mention is that when you buy the book, there's actually a free, like a feedback assessment that you get. So it talks to you about your feedback style, giving it and receiving it. And we should be receiving or seeking feedback outside of work, like for our entire lives. We just want to see how people see us. It doesn't mean we're going to go fix something all the time. It just means we should have an awareness of how the outside world, perceives us. And then, of course, how we can get better about giving feedback to our friends, to our siblings, to our coworkers, right?
So, Heather, do you have a specific question that you use when you're soliciting feedback from those around you?
I really love to be, I don't try to like cushion things or make it sound all polished. In the end, I'm like, listen, I care about my relationship with you and I want to keep it and keep it intact. And I also know that I have blind spots. There's things I am not seeing. And so I want you to just unfettered. I'd love for you to tell me what are some of my blind spots that you see, and do not be afraid. Like I'm asking you specifically. I want you to give me the hard stuff. Okay, give it all to me because I want to make sure that I am shining that insight. I want to make sure that I'm revealing the best part of me, and they're going to give it to you. But here's what I always say, and this goes back to the caring leadership concept, which is if you do the hard stuff up front for people, like if you are there for them, holding space for them when they need you. When something happens outside of work or happens outside of your space of your relationship with them, you're there for them. You're listening to them. You're responsive to them. You're there to try to help them. When you go to them with like, give it to me, give it all to me because I'm looking for the feedback, they're not afraid to tell you that truth because you give it to them in a way you've given back to them in such a way that was full and deep and real that of course they want to give it back to you. And they're going to be less likely to do that if they don't trust you and they're fearful of you. But if you created that safe space early on in your friendships, in your relationships, when you go to them saying, give me what you got, they're going to be more likely to give it to you. And you know what? Take it. I mean, it may be painful, by the way. It might hurt, and it might hurt for some months. I've been there. But I think you'll see a little bit of a good thread inside of it. It can help you get a little better.
Yeah, that's super powerful. And I do love that question. What are my blind spots? What am I not seeing that can help me shine more brightly? So I'd love to hear, Heather, what are you most hoping that readers will take away from the book?
I'd say the number one thing is there's no reason to wait for green lights or to wait for permission or to wait at all. You can take more control of like what's happening on your journey, this thing called life, which includes work, home, community. Oh my gosh, it includes all the things, it includes the ups and the downs. Is why are you waiting? And if you are, like, figure out what that's about and figure out what you can use to be a trigger or a catapult for you to get out of the waiting pattern and to start just saying, I can influence more than I ever thought. And I don't need to have someone else lead me. I can, I can lead me.
That's super powerful. Going back to the topic of feedback, I love this comment here from Glenn. He says, when I give feedback, I usually tell the person that if it's the first time they're hearing something, maybe just tuck it away because it could just be him. And then in the future, if they get similar feedback from others, it's time to pay attention. So that seems to me like a really powerful way to lead yourself if you like are worried about receiving feedback, you have like a framing potentially for it. So thanks for that, Glenn.
That's a very good point, Glenn, too. As I receive feedback, I actually specifically ask for feedback after every event. I have my own survey as much that I seek feedback very, very aggressively. And when I look at it, if I see a trend, like let's say there's one critical comment, and then I see another similar one on another event, and then another one, I'm like, okay, so the thing for me is three. So if I hear a similar thing three times, then for me, it tells me it's time to act. If it's only once, I'm like, okay, it's there. It hurt a little bit. I'm gonna keep going. I hear it again. I'm like, or hear something similar. I'm like, okay, there's something's going on here. And I get to the third, and it's time to act. Okay, so that's kind of my decision making matrix.
Yeah, that's a cool one. So I wanted to circle back to that topic of self-care because we had a couple of people put some thoughts in the chat about how they have self-care. So here's some ideas from Shannon: massages, keeping protein intake up, resting and sleep, stepping away from her desk when she needs to, playing with her kids, listening to sleep tapes, affirmations, reading books to support growth and development, organizing space, creating new ways to tackle chores that allow me to get things done but not be stressed, scripting out how I intend to see myself in situations, being in nature, talking with friends,
Mm,
keeping a positive growth mindset, listening to uplifting music. And we had a few more. So Maria said, drinking enough water, deep breathing, and writing down three things she's grateful for every day. And then being out in nature and a hike with my dog almost every day from Sarah. So I love
I know that's true of Sarah.
those are really good self-care. Meditation is another one. Thank you. I'm not sure how to say your name. Is it Rasa?
Like Ross, I imagine.
Yeah, so Rasa meditation. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah,
Um,
self-care is critical. It really is. At the crux. It's hard for us to shine brightly if we are just so depleted. And whether you're a parent or not, whether you have nieces and nephews, whether you have lots of animals, whatever it is, there's someone who's looking to us, and we get to choose what they get from us. We really do. They get part of us, a tiny bit of us. We have to choose that, and we can't give all those things if we don't load into ourselves. And so we got to maybe what we're doing, well, maybe what we did before for self-care is not enough anymore. That's another thing to consider. Maybe there's
yeah,
something else that needs to get done.
I
I
have
just
a
want you to be thoughtful about that.
Yeah, I have a few I would add, Heather. I don't know if there's anything else that's coming to your mind besides the ones we just read, because that was a really good list. I was thinking of like coaching. So sometimes having a coach can be a way of getting self-care or therapy. Um,
Yes. Yes.
Making sure you tend to your own like medical needs by going to appointments. And then this is less obvious. I love a hot bath.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I think it's good for us to talk about. I was talking to someone earlier and I said it was so interesting. I was speaking to this all male audience, and oftentimes we think that these concepts of self-care or these things about like taking care of ourselves is like a Calgon take me away, like a woman thing. And what I found speaking to this all male audience is no, we are all kind of in depleted state, having to meet all these goals and all these responsibilities and all these mounting expectations. And we haven't really level set our own expectations of ourselves. And so because of that, we're kind of in this incongruent space and we're right. And so this idea of saying what is that fills us up is absolutely going to be critical, irrespective of the walks of life we come from and the roles that we play. And this was like a group of people who were in parts and service at a car dealership. And the thing that resonated with them the most was this idea of leading themselves and filling themselves up and pouring into themselves. So this is not going to ever be old. And we'll always need this discussion. So I'm glad. Thank you for kind of holding space and putting that out there more as well, Becky.
Oh, for sure. Definitely so. And I just love this thought that, you can't lead yourself until you care for yourself.
Mm,
So thank you for helping us remember that
yes.
today. So I'm going to
Thank
go
you.
back one more time to this slide about the art of self leadership, which is coming January 28th, 2025. And you are all invited to the virtual launch party with Amy Edmiston. Did I say her name right?
Edmondson. Yep,
And
Edmondson. Yeah.
you're also invited to join Team 100 and enjoy exclusive benefits, that extra close connection to Heather throughout the launch of the book. And you can go ahead and scan the QR code, or my colleague Wendy, who's been supporting this event so flawlessly, is putting all of those links in the chat for you. I'm going to leave this up for one more second in case anybody wants to snap that QR code. And Heather, I just love the cover of the new book, all of those like muted colors, like all your books kind of like could go on the shelf together and look so beautiful. I'm so
Yeah.
happy for you and proud of you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so excited about this one because it's my first hardcover book. And so the other ones weren't, and this one is, and so it's going to stand so beautifully at the different conferences and on different people's shelves. And I do think it stands out. So I'm really happy about that. I went along this line doing the Art of series mostly because I want to give people guidance. I want to be kind of their coach in this life, right? But at the same time, I want them to use their own brushstrokes to create the life that they need and to have the workplaces be the kind of workplaces they want and to show up in the way they need to in their own style. So we're not cookie cutters of each other, but we just have kind of the same guardrails to a certain extent, and we have maybe a similar vision. But how we execute on that is not going to be the same. And that's why we have the art of on all of those things.
And
So
all those that's interesting, the idea of the brush strokes. So when you see the brush strokes on Heather's covers, you can remember that how you're going to paint your life might be different than how she paints hers, but she's giving you these guidance and guardrails. Yeah, that's amazing. And I know you always wanted a hardcover, so I'm happy for you that you're going to have that one added to your collection. And of course, Heather, you've written so many books already, and you have more to come, and we're all here for it. So as we wrap up our time today, Heather, I'm hoping that you can send us out with some parting thoughts. What are you hoping that people will take away and implement today as we end the session?
I think the number one thing is to figure out who it is you want to be and what it is you stand for, both at work and at home, and how your behaviors align with that or don't. And if you say you believe in self-care, are you pouring into yourself? If you say you believe in receiving feedback and processing it and acting upon at least some of it, are you really? And won't you go gauge that? Like gauge that for yourself. Don't wait for someone else to do this stuff for you. At the end of the day, you're sitting in your own chair. You're responsible for who you are and how you show up. And so that's really what I want people to know, and I want you to kind of act upon. You can lead you, I promise.